And welcome back. Let's go ahead and work on making some variants for our enemies. Now, we currently, of course, have this enemy object that's set all the way over here, which is, of course, the one that we originally had fly into our scene. But then we also created these enemies over here that we use for testing. Now, these enemies, of course, were fine, but let's just go ahead and remove these for now because I'm actually going to use this original one as kind of a reference here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these out here. And I'm going to go revisit my original enemy here. So let's go zoom on in there. And what I want to do is actually first I'm going to create a empty here that's in part of this because I see I don't have anything that actually contains the enemy sprite itself. So let's just call this the enemy ship just to reference that. And I'm just going to drag the model as part of the enemy ship here. And now I can have this available if I want to prefab it because now this will exist. And of course I can make variants from here. Now before I go ahead and start prefabbing everything, we do of course have a few prefabs in here. And one of the things I could do is at this point create another set of folders. The reason why I might want to do that is because this could get very cluttered very quickly, and trying to keep track of what is all what without having to click on everything would be really nice. Because okay, this is a VFX, this is a laser, this is the player itself, this is the enemy VFX, this is a ship VFX. So let's go ahead and just do that. Let's go ahead and create ourselves a folder, and this is going to be everything for the player. So I'm just going to call this the player. And actually, I'm going to rename that, make it a little more precise. Let's call this the player prefabs. There we go, just so you know exactly what that is. I'm going to go ahead and create another folder, and let's call this our enemy prefabs. And I'll make one more for all of our VFXs, since we have a few of those. Let's create a folder and call that the VFX prefabs. Now that those folders are created, let's go ahead and grab our three prefabs. I want to make sure I grab the right ones. That's a prefab, that's a prefab. There, those are all my VFX ones. And so I'm going to just drag and drop those into that one. And these are both related to the player, so I'm going to drag and drop those into the player folder. Now previously we had prefabbed the player, but if I come in here and I say, you know, I want to prefab, let's say, just the ship here. I only want to have just this and the properties underneath it. I don't necessarily want the camera and everything else that goes along with it. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in here as well, just as its own prefab. And notice we get a warning here. It says, cannot restructure prefab instance, children of instance cannot be moved, and components can be reordered. So we just have to go ahead and click open prefab. And so now we get this kind of interior envelope view of the ship. And so we're inside of the player prefab. So here's where I can actually come in, grab the player ship, drag and drop that in here. And so now I have the player ship itself as just a prefab. And so that's going to allow me to manipulate just the ship for different things. So if I want to make variants of it, I will be able to do so. Next, let's go visit our enemy. So I'm just going to go to the enemy prefabs folder here, and notice right now it's empty. And that's because our enemy currently right now is not prefabbed. And so this is something that we can go ahead and prefab. All right, so let's grab our enemy ship, drag and drop that in here. And so now we have our enemy ship prefab. And now what I'm going to do is do something that may not seem like it sense at first, but I promise you it will make sense in time here. So let's go ahead and open up our prefab. And right now, if we look, we of course have our enemy ship, we have the model, we have the blue ship. And what I want to do is basically create a placeholder that's going to record the position of this ship without having to necessarily have this specific component for the model put in here. And so to create that placeholder, let's just go ahead and right click on our player model here. And we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a 3D object. Let's just do a cube. And I want this to basically be set in a way that it's going to occupy the same space as this here. So I'm just going to call this the placeholder. And you know, we can put in parentheses delete me later. Or you can something like to be deleted. Oh, that sounds good. So placeholder or delete later. You know, you can come up with your own combination, just so you have something to kind of work with here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and resize this, so that way I can kind of have a world that is set to where the ship is. So let's go ahead and just resize this cube here. I'm just going to grab that, drag it along, so that way it kind of gets to be about the same size of the spaceship that we are currently working with. It doesn't have to necessarily need to be exactly the same, but we do want it to kind of occupy roughly that same space, just for kind of our place holding purposes here. I'm actually going to just scale that just a little bit more here. maybe in this direction. There, it looks good there. Again, it does not need to be precise, but it just needs to kind of occupy that space for us, just so we kind of know exactly where everything's at. There we go. That looks pretty decent, at least to start here. And of course, like I said, we can. It's just a placeholder right now. It even says the delete layer. And again, this is the part that's not going to make sense. We're actually going to remove the blue ship out of here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that out of there. And you're like, what are you doing this? Well, let's just back off our scene here just for a moment. And you can see right now in our world view, we have, of course, just this box. And the reason why we want to have this here is because we're, again, doing some work here that's going to make our life easier down the road. So let's just collapse the sample scene for a second. Head out to your assets folder and go over to your scenes. Because right now we are, of course, only working with the sample scene. This is kind of our starting scene where we made all of our levels and stuff like that. Now, while we could go through and configure everything here for this particular scene, sometimes it's easier to work in a clean sanitary space. So let's just go ahead and rename our sample scene here. So I'm just going to right click and choose rename. And I'm just going to call this the main level. And I'm going to right click and create a new scene. And let's just call this our ships level. And then I can just double click to open up that. And so now we're in our ships level, which of course has pretty much nothing in it right now because we haven't actually gone through and created or put anything in here. Only thing right now we have is the main camera and the directional light. Now what we can do here is actually start populating the scene. So let's go to our enemy prefabs, drag and drop that little brick we made here earlier. I'm just going to double click on that to kind of zoom in a little bit on this model here. There we go. And what we want to do is reset this transform here. So I'm just going to reset that to position 0. Zoom on over and let's zoom back out here. So there is, of course, the enemy ship prefab. And we, of course, also have our player ship. So I'm going to go drag and drop that in here as well, just so we can, again, have that for reference. So there's our player ship. And I'm going to zero out the Y and Z coordinates. I'm not going to do the same thing for the X because I wanted to make this so that way, basically, I'm going to have a line of these kind of all in a row here. Though maybe I want to maybe zero that one out completely. So let's make that something like 30. Though it looks like I might have to rotate my scene view here just a little bit to kind of get everything in the way that I want it to be. And just kind of scooch that back over so everything's kind of in line. It's just a nice way to see everything visually between these two different objects. Okay, and so we are at a point where we can go ahead and start making some variants. Now, if I just go back to my enemy ship here, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Let's go ahead and head over to our enemy prefabs folder and go ahead and right click and create a prefab variant. And so let's just call this, it says enemy prefab variant, but we're going to make this our enemy ship 1. That looks good to me. And let's just drag and drop that here into our scene. Boom, here it is. Let's just go ahead and just reset the transform on that. And I'm just going to go ahead and just slide that over so they're kind of side by side there. Now this is the part where I can actually come in and actually replace this placeholder with one of my existing assets. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and double click on the enemy ship 1 here. So I'm inside of that. I'm going to go to my assets that I had done previously. I just got to remember which folder. I think I say that's the space shuttle. Here we go, cartoon spaceship. We want our prefabs there. Okay, here's the blue-green spaceship. I'm going to grab the blue one. I'm going to go ahead and drag that into our enemy ship 1 under the model here. And so now that one's in our scene. Of course, it's quite large. I can delete my placeholder. And so let me just zoom out here. And again, it's quite large in comparison to a lot of things. Let me just back out. And you can see how much bigger that ship is in comparison to my shuttle. Now, to make sure that this is done correctly, let's just go ahead and visit our enemy ship 1. We look at our overrides. Currently no overrides. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Double check and make sure we look at our blue ship. All right, everything's looking good there. And I think the reason why it looks good is because I directly went into the prefab itself and made that change. And if we wanted to add in another prefab here, so let me just go to my prefabs folder, enemy prefabs, and I can go ahead and Control D, which of course should make a new prefab, or we can again do like how we did before. We can create a variant of the original enemy as well. So create prefab variant enemy ship 2, and I can easily then drag that into my scene. It now exists here, and we're going to do the same thing as before. We're just going to right click. I'm going to come in and I'm going to give a little bit more space this time because I know the sprite is quite large here. And I'm just going to open this up. This time we're going to go into the hierarchy, and I'm going to open up the model, and I'm going to go where that placeholder is. Let's go ahead and grab from our imported assets here. Let's go ahead and grab our cartoon spaceships here. And I want to go to my prefab. I'm going to grab the green one this time. And I'm going to just drag that in there. And let's delete out this placeholder brick. Now notice it did put the green ship here instead of over here where this particular element is. So let me just go ahead and delete this guy out here. And of course, I can grab enemy ship number 2. I'm going to just move him on over just so he's kind of out of the way. And so look at there's enemy ship number 1. Check that. Make sure that there's nothing weird going on with the position of the model here. Yes, there is some stuff going on here. Let me just reset that one. I'm going to bring him back up. So I send to 0. He's all the way back there. Okay, let's look at our green ship and see. Yep, we do have some weird things going on there. So I'm just going to bring him over just so everything's kind of more in line here. And we don't have anything super crazy going on. They do kind of look like they're floating maybe a little bit. But that's okay. We can always drag those down and stuff like that. But so I think it's perfectly fine for what we're trying to do. So again, little things to look for like that when you're working with your variants. Now, one thing to keep in mind is with this enemy ship 2, because I created it in the hierarchy, I need to go over here to overrides and now click apply all. So that way it updates that prefab. Whereas before I went directly into the prefab and edited it there. Now, one of the things that you might have noticed is that our enemies don't have any colliders, nor do they seem to have any scripts to them. Now, of course, I could go look at the individual models here that I have here. So like this green ship does have, if you look on it, does have the box collider and enemy script. So yes, I'm good here. But if they did not have that, I need to go through and do that. And of course, the easiest way to do that, if they did not have them on here, is I could go into the enemy ship right here. So if I go to enemy ship, open that up, and again, you can see there's nothing here in this model. I could easily come in here and set that in such a way where those are going to have it. So let's just add that in here just so that this exists for this particular model. If you wanted to see how to do it, we can simply just add a component and they would exist, and we can apply that back to that parent and it should populate them through. But I think my enemy ships, fortunately, because we were working with something that's already kind of a prefab from the other package, looks like they have some stuff on here. So let's check out my blue one. Oh, the blue ship does not have anything. All right, excellent. So that's a great way for me to demonstrate this then. So let's go into our enemy ship here. I'm actually just going to go right into the prefab. And what I'm going to do is, on my model here is, if you look, we don't have anything, again, assigned to this. So on the enemy ship, the very topmost layer, let's go ahead and add a component here. We want to add in a box collider. And we also want to add in our enemy script. Now, the box collider itself, we want to make sure we edit that because you notice this is kind of small in comparison to what we actually want here for our box collider to be, because you can see how tiny it is. So I'm just going to drag and stretch that out so it fills a little bit more of the space. And it's actually okay if this box collider is actually a little bit larger than the environment that we're trying to work with. This is just going to give a little bit more forgiveness for the player when they're kind of playing around with everything. So again, just a way to kind of think about that from a game designer perspective. And it does not need to be perfect. I might need to shrink that down just a little bit this way. And let's see, I think that's relatively okay. I'm okay with it, again, not being perfect or uniform. I am going to shrink it back just a little bit of that. All right, and so now that that is set up, now the only thing I need to check before I leave is go to my placeholder and, oh, yep, sure enough, that's what I was worried about. There's a box collider here for this actually little cube that we had originally put in here. We don't actually want that on that cube, so I'm actually going to remove that because I want to rely on the box collider here. And that's, again, okay that this is larger. And I think that should be everything. So let's just back out of our enemy ship. And so now, of course, you can see we have that box collider on there, and we have the enemy script. Oh, I did forget, of course, to add that VFX. So actually, let's go back in there before we get too crazy. Destroy ship VFX. So let's go find, where is that? Well, that is in our prefabs here, and that is part of our enemy prefabs. Oh, not those prefabs. The VFX prefabs. And so I can actually then just grab the enemy destroy and add that. Oh, make sure I'm on the enemy ship. There we go. And drag that into my VFX. There it is, enemy destroyed VFX. And so now that is there. And we knew our enemy ship 1 did not have the items before. So now if I go look at it, it should, of course, have that populated. We have a box collider, and we have, of course, the enemy destroyed. Now, of course, I would have to go edit this box collider to get it to be the way I want, because you can see where it's existing and what's actually present here within this one. I'm going to have to go and play around with this a little bit, because you can see how much different that is. And I might actually hold off on going too crazy with this, because I think I'm going to need to try and adjust this to accommodate for the large size of this thing. Or maybe I'll even wait till I shrink these down, because these enemies are quite large, and I think I might actually try to shrink them down, because looking at the size of them compared to our player ship, yeah, I think I actually might scale these down just a little bit. In fact, let's actually go do that right now and scale those down. But I think this should give you enough to get started. You can set your own scaling and play around with your colliders as needed.